Today's gospel reading, which you've heard sung by the choir, appears at the end of a series of scenes, the prequel to the nativity of Jesus Christ. But rest assured, the prequel is just as action-packed as the main story. Scene 1, the angel Gabriel tells the priest Zacharias his wife Elizabeth will bear a son and they should name him John. But this is a shock because Zacharias and Elizabeth are thinking about retirement and signing up for Medicare. Changing diapers was not part of their retirement plan. Scene 2, Gabriel delivers an even more important message, this time to a teenager named Mary. You have found favor with God. You will conceive and bear a son. Another surprise, and this drama has only just begun, for Mary has not known a man. And how can we, with our 21st century acceptance of every child as a gift, even begin to understand the fear and faith felt by a Jewish teenager of that time? We really can't. Scene 3. Mary may be an ingenue when it comes to babies, but she understands it is really best to leave her small town and the wagging tongues. So she travels a distance to visit with her relative Elizabeth. Elizabeth, now in the story, is 6 months pregnant. And here in this first chapter of the Gospel of Luke, there is this utterly beautiful conversation between an older woman who thought, like Hannah in the Old Testament, she would never have a child, and a younger woman who never thought she would have a child minus a husband. I wonder, is it because Elizabeth had waited a lifetime to feel a baby quickening in her womb that she can say in this moment to this pregnant teenager, "Blessed are you among women"? Now, I will not minimize the anxiety that comes when a baby is conceived unexpectedly. I do not know what that feels like, but perhaps there is someone here who has or does, so I will not offer platitudes nor advice. But in the face of the unexpected, in the wake of sleepless nights, the writer of Luke places a song in the mouth of Mary. And this song, this biblical canticle, has come to be known by one word, Magnificat. It is from the first line in Latin that you heard in the first movement a minute ago. Magnificat anima mea Dominum. My soul magnifies the Lord. Our theme for this Advent. And if you ever have a chance to go to any evensong service, whether at King's College, Cambridge, or St. Mark's School right here in Dallas, you will always hear a musical setting of the Magnificat in evensong. For Mary's song has become the song of every person of faith who longs for the presence of God and who desires to serve God with body and soul. Mary's song must become our song. Magnificat. The songs you sing when you are young, maybe especially as a teenager, find their way deep into your body and soul and memory. I remember being at a skating rink with a church youth group in the early 80s. Anybody remember those days? Have you guys ever even been to a skating rink? Okay, it was the 80s. And hearing the song, so they played music while you skate. I got to catch them up on this. And hearing the song, "We Are the Champions" by Queen. And I have this memory, it's a rock anthem to be sure, and everyone's singing along and laughing and clapping, and most of us are skating. Good times. The lyrics of the Magnificat are an anthem, a joyful shout of praise to the God of creation, the Lord of the universe, the God who has flung the planets into orbit and now, in this moment in the Nativity story, is making the impossible possible. Think about this. God chose to submit God's self to the same gestational journey of every person sitting in this sanctuary. John Donne, whose sermons at St. Paul's Cathedral captivated the London public in the early 17th century, captures the wonder of the Incarnation in his poem, Annunciation. The poet addresses Mary, the mother of the Christ. This is just the ending. Speaking to Mary, "Thou art now thy Maker's Maker and thy Father's mother. Thou hast light in dark, and shuttest in little room immensity, cloistered in thy dear womb." And yet Mary's song is not merely a hymn of praise detached from this world and its harsh realities. Mary's song is also a protest song. Think Bob Dylan, "The times they are a-changin'," for those of us who passed through the 60s. And some of you may hear the same spirit in your generation's protest anthem from Kendrick Lamar's All Right. Mary's words describe the God who is not absent but is active in our world. She says, as the choir has sung, "God has brought down the powerful and lifted up the lowly." In other words, those with empty bellies will finally pull up a chair to the table, groaning under the weight of food, and those who are used to feasting are sent away, unfilled, famished. This is a vision, a dream that all of God's children would have food and shelter. And when Christ's church follows the way of Jesus, it must inevitably feed the hungry, even when this provokes criticism. Dom Helder Camara, a Brazilian priest and the Archbishop of Recife in North Brazil, said, "When I feed the poor, they call me a saint. And when I ask why the poor have no food, they call me a communist." When I came to Wilshire in 2004, the chair of the personnel committee that year was Phil Strickland. Phil was a longtime Wilshire member and the executive director of the Texas Christian Life Commission, and Phil believed that feeding the hungry was a Christian mandate. He began the Texas Baptist World Hunger Offering at the Baptist General Convention of Texas, an offering created to provide not only hope for a better way to live for the undernourished, but also a way to develop a sustainability that would help eradicate hunger and poverty. And we continue to support this special offering, now named the Phil Strickland World Hunger Offering. Sadly, Phil died in 2006, but his legacy lives on and is part of the Wilshire way and the way that we follow Christ, caring for all God's children. The Benedictine monks have a wonderful motto, as if you haven't had enough Latin this morning. Ora et labora, pray and work. And this is the mission of the church, and this is the mission of Wilshire, to worship the God of heaven and to work until heaven comes to earth. And this includes helping eradicate hunger and poverty for everybody. When you think about God, whom do you imagine? I mean, what image do we subconsciously project on this word, God? A cosmic policeman, a tyrannical parent, a divine Santa Claus, there to fulfill our every wish but not ask anything in return? So who is God, and who is this God that Mary praises in the Magnificat? The psalmist of the Hebrew hymn book sheds light on this murky question. The God of Israel is slow to anger and full of mercy. And the Magnificat echoes the psalmist. God has helped his servant Israel in remembrance of God's mercy. The choral work you've just heard was composed by Antonio Vivaldi, a priest and musician who lived most of his life in Venice in the 17th century. Vivaldi composed hundreds of instrumental and choral works. You may have some of them on your favorite Christmas Spotify list. His nickname, this is a fun fact, was Il Prete Rosso, the Red Priest. Did he have red hair? Who knows? For decades, Vivaldi was associated as violin master, director of music, and composer with a Catholic charitable institution, the Ospedale della Pietà, the Hospital of Mercy. Actually, it was an orphanage. These children were cast off by Venetian society, perhaps some because their parents had died in a plague, but others were most likely the results of liaisons between travelers to Venice and the infamous Venetian courtesans. But a remarkable thing happened in the Hospital of Mercy. The girls who were residents received musical training as singers and instrumentalists, and the all-female ensembles were a tourist attraction. There are letters from travelers of the time who marveled at their musical ability. One letter is from a Frenchman named Charles de Brosse, dated about 1739. He writes of the all-girls ensemble and the Pietà. They sing like angels and play the violin, the flute, the organ, the cello, the bassoon. In short, no instrument is large enough to frighten them. And their method of instruction was interesting. The master teachers taught the older students, and in turn, the older, more advanced students taught younger, beginning students, generation to generation. And just imagine how radical it was at that time, or any time that a female orchestra or choir was well known throughout Europe and as well known as the male-dominated orchestras of the time. And most of all, imagine what a mercy it was that an abandoned child was taught how to play an instrument, how to sing, how to make music. Here's an example of the church at its best, praising God, lifting up the lowly from generation to generation. This Advent and Christmas, how will we sing the song of Mary? Yes, it's fine, and let's sing the old familiar carols. And if we need to, let a nostalgic tear course down our cheek. But don't only gaze upward nor backwards. Feed the hungry, lift up the lowly, work to bring heaven down to earth until all souls magnify the Lord. Amen.